Budapest in 1968, Iron Curtain territory, Soviet occupation forces everywhere, Hungarian secret police watching every street corner, every hotel lobby, every damn cafe where foreigners gathered, and me, Billy, sitting in a windowless briefing room in West Germany being told I'd volunteered for something I hadn't actually volunteered for yet. That's how it worked back then. The guy running the briefing looks at you and says, "You volunteered," and you realize he's not asking, he's telling. And if you're smart, if you understand how this game works, you don't argue. You lean forward and you say, "Tell me more." The target was simple on paper: Soviet military attaché staying at the Gellért Hotel in Budapest for a Warsaw Pact conference. High-ranking officer. Brought documents with him, operational plans for Soviet troop movements in Czechoslovakia, defensive positions, communication protocols, the whole intelligence package. Our job was to get into his hotel room while he was out, photograph everything we could find, and get out before anyone noticed we'd been there. Simple. Except nothing's simple when you're operating in denied territory with zero official cover and the entire Hungarian security apparatus looking for exactly this kind of penetration. The guy briefing me was agency CIA, not special forces, not military intelligence. This was a civilian intelligence operation, and they needed someone with specific skills. Someone who could move through hostile territory without looking like military. Someone who spoke enough Russian to read documents fast. Someone who wouldn't panic when things went sideways. Someone who'd done denied area operations before. They had my file. They knew I'd worked cross-border operations in Laos. They knew I'd run singleton missions in North Vietnam. They knew I didn't quit when things got complicated. So here I was being told I'd volunteered. "You'll go in as a petroleum equipment consultant," the briefing officer said. "Canadian cover? We've got documentation, business cards, a full legend built up over 6 months. You're in Budapest to meet with Hungarian oil industry officials about drilling equipment. Legitimate business trip. Plausible reason to be in the country." I looked at the documents he slid across the table. Passport in a name that wasn't mine. Business cards from a company that actually existed. Letters of introduction from Hungarian officials who'd been paid to write them. The whole package looked solid. "How much time do I have in the room?" I asked. 15 minutes maximum. The attaché has a scheduled meeting every afternoon at 3 o'clock. He leaves the hotel at 2:30, returns around 5. That's your window. Security in the hotel. Hungarian secret police have a desk in the lobby. They watch everyone. Soviet KGB has a room on the 3rd floor. They watch everyone, watching everyone. The Gellért is a fishbowl. But it's also a prestige hotel. They're used to Western businessmen staying there. You won't stand out if you act right. "How do I get into the room?" He slid another document across floor plan of the hotel. The Soviet attaché's room marked in red. "Lockpick entry. We'll train you on the specific lock type they use. It's old hardware, pre-war Hungarian manufacture. You can get through it in under a minute if you're good. And if he changes his schedule, if he comes back early," the briefing officer didn't blink, "then you're compromised in a hostile capital with no official cover, and we disavow everything. You become a criminal caught breaking and entering. Hungary prosecutes. Soviet Union probably takes custody. You disappear into their system. That's it. That's the job. No guarantees, no backup, no extraction plan if things go to hell. You're on your own in enemy territory doing something that'll get you locked up or killed if you're caught." I should have said no. Should have told him to find someone else. Should have walked out of that briefing room and gone back to my unit. But I didn't. Because here's what they understood about me. I wanted to be involved. Period. This was the game. This was the work. This was exactly the kind of operation that separated people who talked about being warriors from people who actually were. So I leaned back in my chair and I said, "When do I leave?" 2 weeks. Training starts tomorrow. You'll learn the lock, the camera system, the surveillance detection routes in Budapest, the emergency protocols. You'll memorize the legend. You'll practice until you can do the whole operation. in your sleep. 2 weeks to learn how to burgle a Soviet military officer's hotel room in the middle of communist Hungary. 2 weeks to become someone I'd never been before. 2 weeks to prepare for 15 minutes that could end my career or my life. I said, let's get started. The training facility was outside Frankfurt, old Wehrmacht barracks, converted into agency training space. They had built a full-scale replica of the Gellért Hotel's 4th floor, same wallpaper, same door locks, same lighting, every detail matched. You walk down that hallway and you could have been in Budapest. First thing they taught me was the lock. Hungarian manufactured, 1930-something vintage, pin tumbler, 5 pins, worn smooth from decades of use. The training officer handed me a pick set and said, figure it out. I'd done locks before, basic entry training and special forces covered it, but this wasn't basic. This was speed work. I had to get through that lock in under 60 seconds while my heart was hammering and Hungarian security police might be watching from down the hall. First day I took 3 minutes, fumbled the picks, dropped one, had to restart twice. Training officer shook his head. You've got 2 weeks to cut that time in half or you don't go. So I practiced 6 hours a day, every day, picked that lock until my fingers cramped, picked it blindfolded, picked it while someone yelled in my ear, picked it while running surveillance detection routes, picked it until the muscle memory was so deep I could do it without thinking. By day 10, I was under 60 seconds every time. By day 12, I was under 45. By day 14, I could do it in 32 seconds with my eyes closed. Good enough, the training officer said. Now let's talk about the camera. They'd built a specialized rig for this Minox camera, modified with a document stand. You'd lay the papers flat, position the camera, shoot, advance the film, repeat, fast, systematic photography. No time for artistic composition. Just capture everything and move on. They gave me practice documents, Soviet military paperwork, Cyrillic text, maps, operational orders. I had to photograph 50 pages in under 10 minutes while maintaining quality good enough for intelligence analysts to read every word. First run took me 18 minutes. Too slow, too careful, too worried about getting perfect shots. You don't have 18 minutes? The training officer said. You've got 10, maybe 12 if you're lucky. After that, the risk curve goes vertical. You have to move fast. So I moved fast, sped up the process, got sloppy. Photographed documents with shadows, with blur, with pages not quite flat. No good, he said. Analysts can't read that. Try again. This was the balance. Speed versus quality. Too slow and you get caught. Too fast and the intelligence is worthless. You had to find the sweet spot where you're moving at maximum velocity but still capturing usable imagery. I spent a week just doing document photography. 50 pages, 10 minutes, every shot readable, over and over until I could do it without thinking, until the rhythm was automatic. Lay the page, position the camera, check the frame, shoot, advance, next page. By the end of the second week, I could photograph 70 pages in 10 minutes with 95% quality rate. You're ready, the training officer said. Now let's talk about surveillance detection. Budapest wasn't like operating in Vietnam. In Vietnam, you knew who the enemy was. They wore different uniforms, spoke different language, lived in different areas. In Budapest, everyone looked the same. Hungarian citizens, Soviet advisors, KGB officers, secret police informants. They all dressed alike, spoke Hungarian or Russian, moved through the same streets. The only way to know if you were being followed was to watch for patterns. Same face appearing multiple times. Someone matching your pace. Someone showing up in places they shouldn't be. They taught me the routes, how to use reflections in shop windows, how to make sudden turns and watch who turns with you, how to use public transportation to identify surveillance, how to act natural while running a full detection pattern. You'll have 36 hours in Budapest before the operation. the briefing officer explained. Use that time to establish your cover, meet your business contacts, and run surveillance detection. If you're clean, you go. If you're being followed, you abort. And if I abort, then we try again in 6 months with someone else. But you don't get caught. That's the priority. If there's any doubt, any indication of surveillance, you walk away. I understood the operation mattered, but not as much as keeping me out of Hungarian prison. An unsuccessful mission could be repeated. A captured operative couldn't. They gave me the legend documents, memorized everything, company history, business relationships, technical specifications of petroleum drilling equipment I'd supposedly been selling for 5 years, names of Canadian colleagues, details of past trips to Europe. I became that person. Practice the accent not too thick, just enough Canadian vowel shift to sound authentic. Practice the mannerisms. Relaxed businessman, friendly but not suspicious, someone who belonged in international hotels. By the time I left Frankfurt, I could have passed a polygraph as that petroleum equipment consultant. The legend was that solid. The training was that complete. Now I just had to walk into Communist Hungary and pull off the operation without getting caught. I flew into Budapest on a commercial flight from Vienna and Lufthansa, business class, carried one suitcase with legitimate business materials and a camera bag with the Minox hidden in a false bottom, Canadian passport, cover documentation, nothing that screamed intelligence operative. The airport was all concrete and suspicion. Hungarian border guards checked every passenger like they were looking for contraband, took my passport, examined every page, checked the visa against the list, asked questions in broken English. What is purpose of visit? Business meetings, petroleum equipment sales. Who are you meeting? I gave them names. Hungarian oil industry officials, all verified, all expecting me. The guard made a phone call, spoke rapid Hungarian I couldn't follow, waited, then stamped my passport and waved me through. First test passed. The taxi from the airport took 40 minutes. Soviet-era Lada. Smelled like cigarettes and motor oil. Driver didn't speak English. I gave him the hotel name and he nodded. We drove through Budapest and I watched everything. Street layout, landmarks, escape routes, where the police stations were, where the Soviet military compounds were, where you could disappear if things went bad. The city was beautiful in a faded imperial way. Grand old buildings from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Bullet holes still visible in walls from 1956 when Hungarian rebels fought Soviet tanks. Reminders everywhere that this was occupied territory. The Gellért Hotel sat on the Buda side of the Danube. Massive Art Nouveau building, famous thermal baths, prestige address, the kind of place where Western businessmen stayed when they came to Budapest. Exactly the right cover for someone like me. I checked in at 3 in the afternoon, Hungarian desk clerk, professional smile, efficient processing, took my passport standard procedure in communist countries. They'd return it when I checked out. You are on 4th floor, she said. Room 412. Breakfast is from 7 to 10 in the morning. I thanked her and took the elevator up. 4th floor, same floor as the Soviet attaché. That wasn't coincidence. The agency had arranged it specifically. Easier to explain why I was on that floor if anyone asked. My room was standard hotel, bed, desk, bathroom, window overlooking the Danube. I did a quick sweep, checked for listening devices. Found 2, one in the telephone, one in the overhead light fixture. Expected. Every room in every hotel in every communist country had surveillance. They listened to everything, which meant I had to maintain cover even in my own room. No private conversations, no operational discussions, just be the petroleum consultant I was supposed to be. I unpacked my suitcase, hung up business suits, set out petroleum equipment catalogs, left the camera bag on the desk like any tourist might, acted natural. Then I went downstairs to establish my cover. The hotel bar was full of foreigners, German businessmen, Austrian trade delegates, a couple of British journalists, and in the corner, two guys who screamed Soviet intelligence, short haircuts, cheap suits, eyes that watched everyone. I ordered a beer, Hungarian Dreyer, sat at the bar, acted relaxed. Within 10 minutes, one of the German businessmen struck up conversation, asked what I was doing in Budapest. I gave him the legend, petroleum equipment, Canadian company, meeting with Hungarian industrial officials. He nodded. Tough market. Soviets control everything. I know, but there's opportunities if you know how to navigate the system. We talked for 20 minutes. Business small talk. Nothing operational. Just establishing that I was exactly who I said I was. The Soviet intelligence officers watched the whole time, taking notes, probably reporting back that a Canadian businessman had arrived at the hotel and was behaving normally good. That's exactly what I wanted them to see. I finished my beer, said good night to the German businessman, and went back to my room. Lay in bed knowing the listening devices were recording every sound. Made sure my breathing sounded natural. Made sure I looked like a businessman sleeping off jet lag. Tomorrow I'd run surveillance detection routes. Day after tomorrow I'd execute the operation. But tonight I was just another Western visitor in communist Hungary. Nothing suspicious. Nothing interesting. Just Billy waiting for the moment to move. Woke up at 6:30. Early morning light coming through the window. Budapest spread out below, looking peaceful and ordinary. Hard to believe I was deep in hostile territory planning to commit burglary against Soviet military intelligence. Breakfast in the hotel restaurant. Eggs and toast and Hungarian coffee strong enough to strip paint. Sat where I could watch the entrance. Saw the same Soviet intelligence officers from last night having breakfast 2 tables over. They glanced at me, I glanced back, nodded like you'd acknowledge someone you'd seen around. Normal. Just another guest. After breakfast, I went out for a walk. This was surveillance detection, the real operational work. If they were following me, I needed to know before I went anywhere near that hotel room. The route was planned. I'd memorized it in Frankfurt. Start at the hotel, walk to the chain bridge, cross the Danube, stop at a cafe on the Pest side, browse a bookstore, take a tram 3 stops, walk back across the Margaret Bridge, return to the hotel. 90 minutes total. Enough time and enough variation to identify any pattern of surveillance. I started walking, turned left, out of the hotel, headed toward the river. Watched reflections in shop windows, saw people behind me, couldn't tell if they were following or just walking the same direction. At the chain bridge, I stopped to look at the view. Pulled out a camera, the tourist camera, not the Minox, and took a few photos. While I was framing shots, I scanned everyone around me. 2 Hungarian couples, an old woman feeding pigeons, a young guy in a worker's cap, smoking a cigarette. I crossed the bridge, stopped in the middle to take more photos. The young guy in the worker's cap crossed behind me, stopped to look at the river. Stood too long. Didn't act natural. Possible surveillance. But one sighting didn't confirm it. On the Pest side, I found the cafe I'd planned to visit. Sat at an outdoor table. Ordered coffee. Waited. The young guy in the worker's cap walked past on the opposite side of the street. Didn't stop. Didn't look at me. But he was there. That's 2 sightings in different locations. Pattern developing. I finished my coffee and walked to the bookstore. Small place selling Hungarian literature and Soviet propaganda. I browsed for 15 minutes, picked up a book on Hungarian history, flipped through it while watching the entrance in the security mirror. The young guy didn't follow me inside, but I saw him through the window, standing at a newsstand across the street. 3 sightings, definite surveillance. Damn. I bought the book, paid cash, walked out and headed for the tram stop. Got on the number 49 tram heading north, stood near the back door, watched who got on after me. The young guy in the worker's cap didn't board, but a woman in a gray coat did. She stood near the front, didn't look at me, acted like she was reading a newspaper. New tale. They'd switched watchers. Professional rotation. The tram rattled through the streets, and I thought fast. I was under surveillance. That meant the operation was compromised before it even started. If I went anywhere near the Soviet attaché's room, they'd see it. They'd grab me. Game over. Protocol said abort. Get out clean. Report back that the operation was blown. But here's the thing about protocol. It doesn't account for opportunity. This was a one-shot deal. The attaché would only be in Budapest for another 2 days. If I aborted now, the intelligence was lost. 6 months of planning wasted. Another operative would have to start from scratch. And maybe the surveillance wasn't because they suspected me of intelligence work. Maybe it was just standard procedure. Western businessman gets followed for a day or two to make sure he's legitimate. After that, they lose interest. I had to make a choice, play it safe or take the risk. I got off the tram at Margaret Bridge, started walking back toward Buda. The woman in the gray coat stayed on the tram, didn't follow. But at the bridge, I picked up another tale. Different guy, older, wore a dark suit and walked like he'd done this 1,000 times. 4 different watchers in 90 minutes. This was heavy surveillance, not casual, not standard procedure. They suspected something. I walked back to the hotel, thinking through options. Could I lose the surveillance? Maybe. Could I execute the operation anyway and hope they didn't connect me to the room entry? Risky as hell. Or I could abort, play it safe, live to operate another day. Got back to the hotel around 11, went up to my room, sat on the bed staring at petroleum equipment catalogs while the listening devices recorded everything. The operation was supposed to go down tomorrow afternoon at 2:30 when the attaché left for his meeting. I had 24 hours to decide go or no go. My training said no go. The surveillance was too heavy. The risk was too high. But my gut said the intelligence mattered. Soviet troop movements in Czechoslovakia, operational plans, communication protocols. This was high-value material. The kind of intelligence that could save lives if we got it. I thought about what they'd taught me in special forces, about risk assessment, about calculated gambles, about the difference between being cautious and being paralyzed by fear. And I thought about the principle I'd lived by since day one. Volunteer for everything. Don't turn down hard assignments. Don't walk away when things get complicated. I made my decision. I was going in. The next day was operational prep. I had to act completely normal while getting ready for something extremely abnormal. Breakfast at 7. Same routine. Eggs and coffee. The Soviet intelligence officers were there again. We nodded at each other like acquaintances. I read a German newspaper, looked bored. After breakfast, I had a scheduled business meeting, part of the cover Hungarian oil industry official named János Kovács. We met in a conference room at the Ministry of Industry building downtown. Kovács was in on it, not the operation, just the cover story. The agency had paid him to provide legitimate business meetings that would make my presence in Budapest credible. He didn't know I was intelligence. He thought I was actually a petroleum equipment consultant who'd greased the right palms to get meetings. We talked about drilling equipment for an hour, technical specifications, pricing, delivery schedules, all legitimate business, all documented. If Hungarian security checked on me later, this meeting would confirm my cover. At noon, I went back to the hotel, ate lunch in my room, practiced the operation in my head, visualized every step, opening the lock, entering the room, finding the documents, setting up the camera, photographing the pages, getting out clean. The attaché's meeting was at 3 o'clock. He'd leave at 2:30. I had maybe 15 minutes to get in, get the intelligence, and get out. At 2:15, I left my room. Wore casual clothes, slacks, and a pullover sweater. Nothing that looked tactical. Just a hotel guest going for a walk. I took the stairs down to the 3rd floor, walked to the east stairwell, came back up to the 4th floor from the opposite direction. Basic counter surveillance. If anyone was watching my room, they'd think I'd gone downstairs. The 4th floor hallway was empty. Thick carpet, Art Nouveau light fixtures, doors to 30 rooms. The Soviet attaché's room was 428. End of the hall. Corner room. I walked past it once. Looked normal. No guards posted outside. No obvious surveillance. At 25 past 2, I heard a door open behind me. Footsteps in the hallway. I kept walking. Didn't turn around. Heard the elevator ding. Heard it descend. That was probably the attaché leaving. Right on schedule. I gave it 5 minutes. Stood in the 4th floor alcove pretending to read a hotel information pamphlet. Watched the hallway. Nobody came out. Nobody went in. At 2:30 exactly, I walked to room 428. The lockpicks were in my pocket. Standard tension wrench and hook pick. I'd practiced this lock 10,000 times. Muscle memory was perfect. I inserted the tension wrench, applied light pressure, inserted the hook pick, felt for the first pin, lifted it, felt for the second pin, lifted it, 30 seconds, 3rd pin, 4th pin, 5th pin, 42 seconds. The lock turned, I pushed the door open, stepped inside, closed the door behind me. I was in. The room was identical to mine, same layout, same furniture, same window overlooking the Danube. But this room belonged to a Soviet military officer, and I was about to photograph everything he'd brought with him. First priority, locate the documents. They wouldn't be in the open. He'd hide them somewhere, under the mattress, in a drawer, behind a picture frame, standard tradecraft. I checked the obvious places first. Desk drawers, nothing but hotel stationery. Nightstand empty, under the mattress nothing. Bathroom, checked the toilet tank, checked inside the towel cabinet, nothing. Where would a paranoid Soviet officer hide classified documents in a hotel room he didn't trust? I looked at the suitcase. Standard Soviet military issue, sitting on the luggage rack, locked with a combination lock. That's where they'd be. The combination lock was cheap Soviet manufacture, 3-digit code. I could try to pick it, but that would take time I didn't have. Better to just photograph the suitcase location and move on to wait. I looked closer at the lock. It wasn't fully closed. The shackle was through the zipper pulls, but the lock mechanism wasn't engaged. He'd made it look locked without actually locking it. Sloppy. Or arrogant. Figured nobody would check. I opened the suitcase. Jackpot. Documents. Maps. Operational orders. Everything in Cyrillic. Soviet military planning materials for Warsaw Pact operations. Exactly what we'd come for. I pulled out the Minox camera and the document stand, set them up on the desk, started photographing. First document, Soviet troop deployment schedule for Czechoslovakia. 23 pages. I laid each page flat, positioned the camera, checked the frame, shot, advanced the film. Next page. The rhythm was automatic. Everything I'd practiced in Frankfurt. Fast, systematic photography. No wasted motion. 10 pages done. 3 minutes elapsed. 20 pages done. 6 minutes elapsed. I was halfway through the 3rd document, communication protocols for Soviet signals intelligence units, when I heard footsteps in the hallway. I froze. Listened. The footsteps stopped outside the door. My heart hammered. This was it. I was compromised. Someone had seen me enter. Hungarian security was about to kick in the door, and I'd spend the rest of my life in a communist prison. The footsteps moved on, stopped at another door further down the hall. I heard a key in a lock, a door opening, closing. Just another hotel guest. I went back to photographing, forced myself to slow down my breathing. The panic response wanted to take over. Wanted to make me rush. Wanted to make me sloppy. I pushed it down. Focused on the work. 30 pages done. 8 minutes elapsed. 40 pages done. 10 minutes elapsed. I finished the communication protocols document and moved to the next one. Defensive positions for Soviet tank units, grid coordinates, artillery placement, exactly the kind of tactical intelligence NATO needed. 50 pages done. 12 minutes elapsed. I was running out of time. The attaché could come back early. Someone could knock on the door. The longer I stayed, the higher the risk. But I kept photographing because this was the mission. This was what I'd come for. Every page was intelligence that could save lives. Every page was worth the risk. 60 pages done. 14 minutes elapsed. Last document, Soviet Operational Readiness Assessment for Warsaw Pact forces. 28 pages. I photographed them all. Fast, systematic, professional. 78 pages total. 15 minutes and 40 seconds. I packed up the camera, put the documents back in the suitcase exactly how I'd found them, closed the suitcase, made sure the lock was positioned exactly as it had been, shackled through the zipper pulls, mechanism disengaged, looked around the room, everything in place. No evidence I'd been there. I went to the door, listened, heard nothing. Opened the door a crack, checked the hallway, empty, stepped out, closed the door quietly, walked away, got to the stairwell, took the stairs down to the 3rd floor, walked to my room from the opposite direction I'd left. Nobody stopped me, nobody questioned me, nobody even looked at me. I was clean, got to my room, locked the door, sat on the bed breathing hard. I'd just committed burglary against Soviet military intelligence in the middle of Budapest. Photographed 78 pages of classified operational planning materials and walked out without getting caught. The Minox camera with the film was in my pocket. Now I just had to get it out of Hungary. The next morning I had to act like nothing had happened, like I was just a petroleum equipment consultant finishing up business meetings in Budapest, like I hadn't spent 15 minutes in a Soviet officer's hotel room photographing classified documents, breakfast at 7:30, same routine. The Soviet intelligence officers were there. They looked at me with slightly more interest than before. Maybe they suspected something. Maybe they were just bored. I ate eggs and toast and read a newspaper and acted normal. At 9 o'clock, I had another scheduled business meeting. Different Hungarian official, same cover story. Drilling equipment sales. We talked for 2 hours about technical specifications and pricing and delivery schedules. All legitimate, all documented, all designed to reinforce the cover. But the whole time I was thinking about the film, the Minox in my camera bag back at the hotel, 78 pages of Soviet operational intelligence. The entire reason I was in Budapest, getting into the room, had been the hard part. Now I had to get the intelligence out of the country. The plan was simple. Return to Vienna on the scheduled commercial flight tomorrow afternoon. Standard business traveler, leaving after completing meetings. Nothing suspicious. But getting film through Hungarian customs and security was the risk point. They searched bags. They checked cameras. If they found the Minox with exposed film, they'd arrest me on the spot. The agency had built a concealment device into my camera bag. False bottom, looked completely normal, but had a hidden compartment where the Minox would fit, good enough to pass casual inspection. But if they really searched the bag, if they started measuring internal dimensions against external dimensions, they'd find it. I finished the business meeting at 11. Went back to the hotel, packed everything except what I'd need for tonight and tomorrow morning. Put the Minox in the concealment device, made sure it was completely hidden. Then I went for a walk, surveillance detection again, same route as before. Chain Bridge, cafe on the Pest side, tram ride, walk back across Margaret Bridge. This time I picked up surveillance immediately. Same young guy in the worker's cap. standing outside the hotel when I left, following at a distance. They hadn't stopped watching me. I ran the full route. The young guy stayed with me the whole time, professional tail, kept his distance, didn't make it obvious, but he was there. At the cafe, I ordered coffee and thought about what this meant. If they suspected I was intelligence, they wouldn't just follow me. They'd arrest me, take me in for questioning, search my room, find a camera. So they didn't know. They just suspected routine surveillance on a foreign businessman, making sure I was who I said I was, which meant I could still get out clean. As long as I didn't do anything suspicious, as long as I maintained the cover all the way to the airport. I finished my coffee and walked back to the hotel. The young guy followed. I went up to my room. He stayed in the lobby. Standard procedure. Watch the foreigner till he leaves the country. Make sure he's not doing anything Hungary doesn't want him doing. Too late for that. That night I had dinner in the hotel restaurant, steak and potatoes and Hungarian wine. The Soviet intelligence officers were at their usual table. They nodded at me. I nodded back. After dinner, I went to the hotel bar, ordered a beer. The same German businessman I'd talked to on my first night was there. We talked about business for half an hour. He complained about Soviet bureaucracy. I agreed it was challenging. Normal conversation. Nothing operational. At 10 o'clock, I went back to my room, lay in bed listening to the sounds of the hotel, knowing the listening devices were recording everything. Knowing Hungarian security was probably reviewing the tapes every night looking for suspicious behavior. I had to sound like a businessman sleeping before an early flight, not like an intelligence operative who just pulled off a document theft operation. So I breathed normally, shifted position occasionally, made the small sounds people make when they're sleeping, and thought about the film in the camera bag, 78 pages of Soviet operational plans, the intelligence NATO needed, the reason I'd risked everything. Tomorrow I'd get it out, or I'd get caught trying. Checkout time was 9 o'clock. I packed the last of my things, did a final sweep of the room to make sure I wasn't leaving anything behind. The camera bag sat on the bed, concealment device holding the Minox with the exposed film. Everything riding on whether that hiding spot was good enough. I went down to the lobby. The Hungarian desk clerk processed my checkout efficiently, returned my passport, asked if my stay had been satisfactory. Very pleasant, I said, thank you. The taxi to the airport was scheduled for 9:30. I sat in the lobby waiting. The young guy in the worker's cap was there, reading a newspaper, not looking at me, but there. The taxi arrived, I got in, put my suitcase in the trunk, kept the camera bag with me. The driver headed for the airport. I watched out the rear window. A black Lada followed us. Not subtle, not trying to hide, just let me know I was still being watched. We drove through Budapest, past Soviet military compounds, past Hungarian police stations, past all the infrastructure of a surveillance state, keeping tabs on everyone. At the airport, the taxi dropped me at departures. I paid the driver, took my bags. The black Lada parked across the street. The guy in the worker's cap got out, followed me into the terminal. I checked in for the flight to Vienna, Lufthansa, departing at 11:15. The counter agent processed my ticket, took my suitcase, gave me a boarding pass. Gate 7, she said. Boarding begins at 10:30. I thanked her and headed for security. This was the checkpoint. If they were going to search my bags, it would be here. I put the camera bag on the conveyor belt, walked through the metal detector, no alarm. On the other side, a Hungarian customs officer was pulling bags off the belt for inspection. Random searches, or not so random. He pulled mine. Open, please, he said in English. I opened the camera bag, showed him the contents. Tourist camera, lens, film canisters, photography equipment. He picked up the camera, examined it, looked at the lens, put it down. You are a photographer? Amateur, I said. Just taking pictures of Budapest. Beautiful city. He nodded, looked through the rest of the bag, picked up a film canister. opened it, saw the roll of film inside, closed it. The Minox was 6 inches from his hand, hidden in the false bottom. If he measured the bag's depth against its interior space, he'd find it immediately. He put the film canister back, closed the camera bag, handed it to me. "Have good flight," he said. I thanked him and walked toward the gate. Didn't run, didn't hurry, didn't show any emotion at all. Just walked like a businessman heading home after a successful trip. But inside I was screaming with relief. He'd had the concealment device in his hands and hadn't found it. The agency's tradecraft had held up. The false bottom was good enough. I got to the gate, sat down, waited for boarding. The young guy in the worker's cap was there, sitting across the waiting area, still watching. He'd watched till the plane took off. Standard procedure, make sure the foreigner actually leaves the country. At 10:30, they called for boarding. I walked to the gate, showed my boarding pass, walked down the jetway onto the aircraft, found my seat, window seat, row 12, put the camera bag under the seat in front of me. The plane filled up, German businessmen, Austrian tourists, a few Hungarians traveling to the west. At 11:15, the engine started. The plane pushed back from the gate. We taxied to the runway. The pilot announced takeoff in German and English. The engines roared. The plane accelerated, lifted off. I looked out the window and watched Budapest disappear below, watched Hungary disappear, watched the Iron Curtain disappear. We crossed into Austrian airspace. 20 minutes later, I was out, clean, with the intelligence. The operation was complete. Back in West Germany, they debriefed me for 3 days, wanted every detail, every moment of the operation, every decision I'd made, every risk I'd taken. The film was developed immediately, 78 pages of Soviet operational planning materials, troop deployments for Czechoslovakia, defensive positions, communication protocols, artillery placements, signals intelligence procedures, high-value intelligence, the kind that changes military planning, the kind that saves lives. The analysts pored over it for weeks, built entire assessments of Soviet capabilities based on what those documents reveal, identified weaknesses in Warsaw Pact defensive positions, found communication vulnerabilities that could be exploited. One operation, 15 minutes in a hotel room. 78 pages of intelligence that altered NATO's understanding of Soviet military readiness. That's what this work was about. Not the drama, not the adventure, not the adrenaline rush of operating in hostile territory. The intelligence, the actual material that gave our side an advantage. And here's what they told me afterward. The surveillance I'd picked up in Budapest wasn't because they suspected me of intelligence work. It was standard procedure. Every Western businessman got followed for a day or two. After that, if they seemed legitimate, Hungarian security lost interest, I could have aborted. Could have walked away because the surveillance made me nervous. Could have played it safe, but I didn't. Because safe doesn't get the intelligence. Safe doesn't advance the mission. Safe doesn't give NATO the planning materials they need to counter Soviet operations. Risk gets it, calculated risk. The kind where you assess the situation, understand the dangers, and decide the potential gain is worth it. That's the job. That's always been the job. You don't quit because things get complicated. You don't walk away because you picked up surveillance. You don't abort because the operation gets harder than you thought. You adapt, you assess, you execute, and you get the intelligence out. 3 years later, the Soviets invaded Czechoslovakia, rolled tanks into Prague, crushed the reform movement, occupied the country. NATO knew it was coming, knew the operational plans, knew the deployment schedules, knew the communication protocols. Because of documents photographed in a Budapest hotel room by a guy pretending to be a Canadian petroleum equipment consultant, that's why it mattered. Listen. This Budapest operation wasn't unique, wasn't some special one-time thing. It was standard denied area work. The kind of operation intelligence services run every day in hostile territory. What made it successful wasn't luck, wasn't special talent, was training and preparation and willingness to accept risk. 3 principles carried that operation. First, physical capability. I had to pick that lock in under 60 seconds. Had to photograph 78 pages in 15 minutes. Had to move through a hostile city running surveillance detection routes for 90 minutes without getting compromised. None of that works if you're not physically capable. If your hands shake, if you're out of breath after climbing stairs, if you can't maintain operational pace for extended periods, physical fitness isn't optional in this work. It's the foundation everything else builds on. You maintain your body the same way you maintain your weapons. Because when the operation goes down, physical weakness will kill you faster than enemy action. Second, never quit. I picked up heavy surveillance on my first day. Protocol said abort. Training said walk away. Common sense said the operation was compromised. But I stayed, assessed the risk, decided it was manageable, executed anyway. Could have been wrong. Could have gotten caught. Could have spent decades in Hungarian prison. But I wasn't wrong because I didn't panic, didn't let fear make the decision, evaluated the situation, and chose to continue. That's what never quit means. Not stupid persistence, not ignoring danger, but refusing to let difficulty be the reason you fail. Third, volunteer for everything. The agency came to me for this operation because I'd said yes to difficult assignments before, because I had a reputation for being willing to operate in denied territory, because I'd volunteered for hard jobs when other people played it safe. That's how careers advance in this world. Not by being the most talented, not by being the most skilled, by being the person who says yes when everyone else says no. The guy who volunteers for the tough missions gets the tough missions. And tough missions are where you learn, where you prove yourself, where you build the capabilities that separate warriors from people who just talk about being warriors. Every single operational principle I've talked about in every story comes back to these 3 things. Physical capability, never quit, volunteer for everything. That's it. That's the whole game. Everything else is just details. Budapest taught me something about intelligence work that I carried through the rest of my career. The real danger isn't the enemy, isn't the surveillance, isn't the possibility of getting caught. The real danger is hesitation. You train for months. You prepare for every contingency. You build the legend. You learn the routes. You practice the tradecraft. And then when the moment comes when you're standing in that hallway with the lockpicks in your hand, you have to execute. Can't second guess. Can't reconsider. Can't let fear paralyze you. You either do it or you don't. And if you don't, all the training was worthless. I've seen operators hesitate, brilliant guys, well-trained, physically capable. But when the moment came, they froze, couldn't pull the trigger, couldn't make the entry, couldn't commit, and they failed. Not because the operation was impossible, because they hesitated. That's what separates warriors from civilians. Not violence, not killing, hesitation. Warriors act when action is required, period. They don't wait for perfect conditions. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for someone else to make the decision. They assess, they decide, they execute. That Soviet attaché left his room at 2:30 every afternoon like clockwork, had a meeting he couldn't miss, was predictable and habitual. I had 15 minutes, maybe 20 if I was lucky. That was the window. I could have hesitated, could have thought about all the things that might go wrong, could have convinced myself the surveillance was too heavy, the risk was too high, the operation was blown before it started, but I didn't hesitate. I walked down that hallway, picked that lock, and got the intelligence. Because that's what this work requires. Not perfection, not genius, Action. The documents I photographed changed NATO's understanding of Soviet capabilities in Central Europe, gave us tactical advantages we used for years, saved lives that would have been lost without that intelligence, all because I didn't hesitate. That's what I want you to understand. Not that this work is glamorous, not that it's exciting, not that you'll be some kind of hero. You'll be a guy picking a lock in a hotel hallway, knowing if you get caught, your career is over, and your freedom is over, and maybe your life is over, and you'll do it anyway, because the intelligence matters, because the mission matters, because you're a warrior, and warriors don't quit when things get hard. They execute. Simple as that. Billy Wall, Budapest, 1968, 15 minutes that mattered more than most people's entire careers. Not because I'm special, because I volunteered, because I trained, because I didn't hesitate, because I never quit. That's the lesson. Take it or leave it.